What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. So we did quarterback rankings a couple days ago. Now we're going to do running back rankings. So we're going to rank every single starting running back in the NFL from 32 to 1. And this video shouldn't be as long as the quarterback video just because I don't know as much about the running backs as I do the quarterbacks. But who knows? Yeah, let's just jump into this. So coming in at number 32, I have Zamir White. This is a guy I really don't know much about from the Las Vegas Raiders. He's going to be their new starter with Josh Jacobs in Green Bay. Last year on 4.3 yards per carry, he had 451 yards, 1 touchdown, 15 catches, 98 yards for 0 touchdowns. He's been in the league for about 2 seasons. And his ceiling, I think, is 19th if he breaks out, just because we haven't really seen much from him. He hasn't really had an opportunity to show us much. So it's kind of one of those things where we just I don't really know what he's capable of. So this is just a safe ranking for him. And then his floor is obviously towards the bottom. Coming in at number 31 is a guy I do know a lot about, Ezekiel Elliott from the Dallas Cowboys. Last year with the New England Patriots, his 1 season there, he averaged 3.5 yards per carry with 642 rushing yards as well as 3 rushing touchdowns. He had 51 catches, which is actually a lot for Ezekiel Elliott now that I look at that, for 313 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. He's been in the league for 8 seasons, and his ceiling, I think, is 21st if he shows like kind of gets back towards his prime. Obviously, prime Ezekiel Elliott's probably a top 5 running back, to be honest. But at the same time, I think that 21st is a good spot for him right now if he has a really good season back in Dallas. And then his floor, I put 32nd, so last in the league. I mean, he didn't really have that good of a year in New England. He didn't really have that good of a year prior in Dallas, so we'll see how he does coming back with no Tony Pollard. Coming in at number 30, I have Chuba Hubbard. I believe that's how you say his name. Now I'm saying it out loud. I'm kind of doubting myself. But anyways, from the Carolina Panthers last year, he had 3.8 yards per carry with 902 rushing yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, as well as 39 catches for 233 yards and 0 receiving touchdowns. He's been in the league for 3 seasons now, and his ceiling, I think he has a lower ceiling than most. I put him at 25th, and his floor is I think he could be the worst running back in the league. Just an inefficient offense. I think from what we've seen from him in his career so far, I don't think he's going to be a breakout candidate this season. He is entering his 4th year, and I believe he was the starter last year. I know Miles Sanders was over there, so maybe not. But, yeah, he I don't know. I think from what we've seen from him so far, I think maybe this is his ceiling. Or around where he will rank in the NFL. Coming in at number 29, I have Devin Singletary from the New York Giants. He's a new addition. I was doing these rankings, and it's actually insane to me how many running backs change teams. There was like half the running backs on this list are on a new team. But anyways, Devin Singletary with the New York Giants. Last year, he had 4.2 yards per carry, 898 rushing yards, as well as 4 rushing touchdowns. 30 catches for 193 yards and 0 touchdowns on the receiving end of the game. He's been in the league for about 5 seasons now with the Bills and Texans. His ceiling, I think he's a a low ceiling type of running back. We kind of know what to expect from him. I think, and he's going to be in a horrible offense too. It's going to be bad, dude. It's kind of funny he's wearing 26, but his ceiling I think is going to be 26th in the league, and his floors I think he could be the worst. Coming in at number 28, I have Najee Harris. This is a guy I'm not super high on. He's just so frustrating. I've had him in fantasy for like 2 seasons in a row, and it's just so annoying. But anyways, last year he had 4.1 yards per carry, 1,035 yards on the ground, 8 rushing touchdowns for 29 catches, 170 yards, and 0 touchdowns. He's been in the league for about 3 seasons now. His ceiling, I think, is 18th if he can kind of get back to where he was as a rookie. And his floor is around this area, like 29th, 28th. But I'm a big Jaylen Warren stan. I will always believe in Jaylen Warren. I thought he should have been the Steelers starter all last year. For some reason, they think Najee is their guy, and I think he's going to start for them again this season, even though I think Jalen Warren is a much better running back. But I think Najee's still pretty good. Coming in at number 27, I got Ramondre Stevenson from the New England Patriots. Last year in a horrible offense, he averaged 4 yards per carry, as well as 619 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns with 38 catches for 238 yards and 0 touchdowns. It's kind of a weird year with Ezekiel Elliott in the backfield as well. And he dealt with some injuries, and it was just such a bad offense. I cannot emphasize that enough. But I think, it's going to be another rough year for him. Zeke won't be in the backfield with them, so he'll probably get more touches, but he's just going to be in such a bad offense again. He's been in the league for 3 seasons now. His ceiling, I think, is 23rd. Just like I said, the offense is going to cap that ceiling for him. And his floor is, I think, 31st. Coming in at number 26, I got former Sun Devil Rachaad White for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Man, his yards per carry, 3.6 yards per carry. He's right over there with Zeke for 990 yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, 64 catches, 549 yards for 3 receiving touchdowns. He's been in the league for about 2 seasons now. His ceiling, I think, is 21st. If he can be a little bit more explosive. That's my biggest thing with him is when you watch him, he just doesn't look super explosive. But Tampa Bay really believes in him, and they think that he's their guy. But his floor is, I think, 29th. I don't know. We'll see this season if they try and switch it up a little bit, because last year he dominated the backfield, which was good for me because I had him in fantasy. Coming in at number 25, I have Brian Robinson Jr. From the Washington Commanders. Last year, he had 4.1 yards per carry for 733 yards and 5 touchdowns, as well as 36 catches for 368 yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. He's been in the league for about 2 seasons now. His ceiling, I think, is around that 21 area, along with Rachaad White, and his floor is, I think, 28th. So he's kind of he's a pretty safe running back, I would say. I think they're still going to roll with Brian Robinson Jr. I do not think they're going to start Austin Eckler. I think maybe it'll be more of a split backfield, but I think Robinson Jr. will be their day 1 starter. Coming in at number 24, I got Javonte Williams from the Denver Broncos. Also kind of an inefficient running back at 3.6 yards per carry. He also dominates with volume, though. He had 774 yards, as well as 3 rushing touchdowns, and then 47 catches for 228 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's been in the league for about 3 seasons now. His ceiling, I think, is 22nd. I think this is kind of close to his ceiling, honestly, from what we've seen in his career so far. And his floor is, I think, 29th in the league. Coming in at number 23, we have the former Raven, Gus Edwards. This is a guy I'm really high on, and I think he'll do great in LA. Very, very big fan of Gus Edwards. Last year for the Ravens, he had 4.1 yards per carry for 810 rushing yards, 13 rushing touchdowns, as well as 12 catches, 180 yards, and 0 touchdowns. He is not a receiving back. He never has been. But what he does very well. And like I said this in the power ranking video, but Gus Edwards is very big. Very big running back. Like, dude, look, he looks like he's as tall as Justin Herbert, who's like 6'5". So, yeah, he's just a beast. I think he's going to do great for the Chargers. He's been in the league for about 5 seasons now, and his ceiling, I think, is 21st. So, a couple spots up from here, and his floor could be 28th towards the bottom. But I think he'll be a very solid running back for the Chargers. Coming in at number 22, we have Raheem Mostert, who will most likely be splitting with Devon Achane. Not too sure, though. From the Miami Dolphins. Such an efficient offense. Last year, he had 4.8 yards per carry for 1,012 yards, as well as 18 rushing touchdowns, which led the league. I'm pretty sure it had to have been. 18 is a lot. As well as 25 catches for 175 yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. So he had 21 total touchdowns last season. He had a phenomenal year, and it was in his 9th season in the NFL. He's been in the league for 9 years. His ceiling, if this offense is as good as last year, he could go back up to 14th. But Devon Achane might take over that starting spot. Miami could take a step back, and I think that could drop him down to 25th. Coming Coming in at number 21, we have James Conner from the Arizona Cardinals, possibly the most underrated running back in the league, to be honest. He is so underrated at this point in his career. But last year he had 5 yards per carry for 1,040 yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, as well as 27 catches for 165 yards and two touchdowns. And that's in not that good of a offense as well. I mean, the offense definitely got better once Kyler Murray took over, but still, it wasn't a good team, wasn't a winning offense, and he was very efficient last season. One of their bright spots in Arizona. But he's been in the league for about 7 years now. His ceiling is, I think, around Raheem Mostert's area, about 14th. And then his floor is, I think, honestly, around here. I might be under ranking him. He could have a breakout season this year with a full year with Kyler Murray. Coming in at number 20, we have Tony Pollard, who is another new addition to the Tennessee Titans. And he did not have that good of a year last year. I honestly completely forgot that Tony Pollard went to the Titans until I made this ranking. And I got really excited about it, but then I remembered how he did last season as a full-time starter. And it honestly wasn't that good. But he had 4 yards per carry, which is like the golden mark, for about 1,000 yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, as well as 55 catches for 311 yards and 0 touchdowns. I don't know. You would have liked to see more from him. And he's been in the league for about 5 seasons now. His ceiling, if we see the Tony Pollard that we saw when Zeke was in Dallas, I mean, his ceiling could be 9th, one of the most efficient running backs in the entire league. He could be a top 10 running back in the league easily. But his floor could also be around this area. I think more realistically, he'll lean towards his floor just because this Titans offense will be going through some growing pains. And, it's not that good of a team. So we'll see how he does. He's definitely not going to be in as good of an offense as he was in Dallas, but we'll see what happens. And then coming in at number 19, we have another new arrival. You could argue Tony Pollard over him, but I'm actually a huge fan of Zach Moss. I thought he did great for the Indianapolis Colts last year. He made a case to be the starter for them, which when you're on the same team as Jonathan Taylor, that's just crazy. But I thought he was very efficient. He had 4.3 yards per carry for 794 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns, as well as 27 catches for 192 yards and 2 touchdowns. He will be the full-time starter in Cincinnati. Fantastic offense, much better offense than he will be in, or that he was in Indianapolis. He's been in the league for about 4 seasons now, and his ceiling is 14th, a couple spots up from here, or it could be 25th. You'll notice with a lot of these players that are joining new teams, they're going to have high ceilings and low floors because you just never know how they're going to adapt in that environment. If he really takes off with this new offense, he could go up to 14th, be the top half of the league in running backs, but he could also drop a lot if he just if he just doesn't mesh well. Coming in at number 18, we have another new arrival in Aaron Jones to the division rival Minnesota Vikings, and I think Aaron Jones is still a fantastic running back. He showed that last season with the Packers. He had a lot of injuries. Setbacks last season, but when he was healthy, he was so good for them, and especially in the playoffs, he was very, very good for the Green Bay Packers last season. We'll see if it carries over in Minnesota. Last year, he had 4.6 yards per carry, which is fantastic, for 656 yards, 2 touchdowns, as well as 30 catches for 233 yards and 1 touchdown. He's been in the league for about 7 seasons now, and his ceiling is, I think, that 14th spot. And his floors, he could drop to 22nd, but he's going to be a good running back. He's going to be efficient. He's going to be consistent. I think he'll do well in Minnesota. Be a nice piece for Sam Darnold to use. Coming in at number 17, we have another new arrival in Joe Mixon from the Houston Texans. Love this addition for the Texans. And last season for the Bengals, he had 4 yards per carry for about 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, as well as 52 catches for 376 yards and 3 touchdowns. He has been in the league for about 7 seasons now, so same as Aaron Jones. And his ceiling, honestly, I put him higher than Aaron Jones and a couple of the other guys I was talking about. His ceiling is, I think, 9th. And it's kind of goes the same with Tony Pollard, where if we see prime Joe Mixon with this efficient of an offense in Houston, if they all mesh really well together and they really take off, I think he could be a top 10 running back this season for them. But his floor is he could drop to 21st. It just kind of depends. But I really do like the fit of him going to Houston. Coming in at number 16, I have DeAndre Swift, another new signing, new player on a new team. He's on the Chicago Bears now. He spent last season with the Eagles, had a very good season with them, averaged 4.6 yards per carry for about 1,000 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns, as well as 39 catches for 214 yards and 1 touchdown. And he didn't score. He didn't get in the end zone a whole lot, but he was so efficient. Whenever they handed him the ball, it was like a guaranteed 6 or 7 yards. It was crazy. Like there was genuinely a point in the season where every time he got the ball, you knew he was either going to pick up a first down or get them already close to it. And a lot of that had to do with how good the Eagles' offensive line was, but he's still a very good running back, and he's only been in the league for 4 years. His ceiling, I think, is 10th, top 10. If, like I said with Houston, if this offense really takes off and does really well together, DeAndre Swift could become a very good running back, and I think he could be top 10. His floor is he could drop to 21st if he just doesn't really fit well in Chicago. But I know I'm sounding really redundant with this, but it's kind of the same situation for all these running backs going to new teams. And coming in at number 15, we have a guy who has been with his team for a while now, Alvin Kamara from the New Orleans Saints. Last year, he averaged 3.9 yards per carry for about 694 yards and 5 touchdowns, as well as 75 catches for 466 yards and 1 touchdown. Alvin Kamara at this point in his career is really hard to rank just because he's been going in and out of injuries and he's looked like his old self. Then he's had games where he's just looked really bad. And I don't know. It's kind of hard to rank him at this point. I still think he's a very good running back. I still think he's a safe running back, especially when you're doing these rankings. So I think his ceiling is like kind of right here and his floor is kind of right. Like he's low ceiling, high floor at this point in his career. Still a very good running back, though. Coming in at number 14, we have David Montgomery from the Detroit Lions. Last year was his first year in Detroit, and he had a he had a career year last year for them. 4.6 yards per carry for about 1,000 yards, as well as 13 rushing touchdowns, 16 catches for 117 yards and 0 touchdowns. Not a receiving back at all, but he is such a good power back for them. He's been in the league for about 5 seasons now. His ceiling, I think, is 10th. He could be top 10 this year for Detroit. I think Jahmyr Gibbs will take a bigger piece of that pie this season, though. And I think his floor is 22nd if Jahmyr Gibbs just completely takes over, halfway through the season or even sooner. Coming in at number 13, I have Isaiah Pacheco from the Kansas City Chiefs, another guy who had a career last year, really made a name for himself. He's not just Patrick Mahomes running back. He is Isaiah Pacheco, and he honestly is very, very talented. Last year, he had 4.6 yards per carry. That's so scary on an offense like the Chiefs. For 935 yards, 7 touchdowns, as well as 44 catches, 244 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's been in the league for only 2 seasons, and his ceiling, I think, is 6. He could get close to that top 5 this year if he really breaks out with the Chiefs. And his floor is, I think, 20th if he takes a step back in his 3rd year. But I don't think he will. I mean, this guy is so good, and every time you watch him, he just looks like he's running for his life. Like, every single snap is 110% effort, and it's gone a long way for him. I think he was like a 7th-round pick, so yeah, he's had a great start to his career so far. 2-time Super Bowl champion. I'd say that's a good start. Coming in at number 12, I have Kenneth Walker III from the Seattle Seahawks. Last year, he had 4.1 yards per carry for 905 yards and 8 rushing touchdowns, as well as 29 catches for 259 yards and 1 touchdown. Another guy who struggled with injuries last year. Still had a decent year, and he's still a very good running back. He's only been in the league for 2 years. But I think his ceiling is 10th, so just a little bit up from here, top 10. And I think his floor is 16th. I think there is a chance that this could be a split backfield this year with Zach Charbonnet. Both very young, very talented, and I could see them splitting the backfield. Maybe Charbonnet taking over towards the end of the year, but I don't know. Kenneth Walker is still super good, so he could be a top 10 running back still this season. Coming in at number 11, we have Josh Jacobs, who we're starting to get back to running backs who are joining new teams this year. But we have Josh Jacobs from the Green Bay Packers. Last year, kind of a down year for the Raiders, but I think he'll bounce back, especially with Jordan Love. But he had 3.5 yards per carry for 805 yards and 6 touchdowns, as well as 37 catches, 296 yards, and 0 touchdowns. He's been in the league for only 5 years. And his ceiling, I think, is 7th, and his floor is, I think, 20th. Like I said, high ceiling, low floor, because we don't know how he's going to do with this offense. It's a completely different offense than what he had in Las Vegas, which should be a good thing. Coming in at number 10 and rounding out our top 5, we have Kyren Williams from the LA Rams, who had a breakout season last year. He had 5 yards per carry. For 1,100 yards, 12 touchdowns, as well as 32 catches for 206 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's only been in the league for 2 years. His ceiling, I think he could be a top 5 running back this year. I mean, he was so good last year for the Los Angeles Rams. Nobody expected it either. I'm trying to remember who they started the year off with. I think it was, oh my gosh, yeah, because I think I drafted him. Oh my gosh, Cam Akers. Yeah, Cam Akers. It was yet again another year where people thought Cam Akers was going to break out. He obviously didn't. They benched him in like week 2. Nobody saw Kyren Williams becoming that guy, and he did for them. He was so good. His floor, if he takes a step back this year, which sometimes happens to running backs, he could be 17th, around half, middle of the pack. Coming in at number 9, we have Dalvin Cook's brother, James Cook, who I don't know if you watched our I forget which episode it was, but last season I had just found out that James Cook was Dalvin Cook's brother, which is still crazy to me. I mean, James Cook is so talented. He showed it last year. He had a great year for them, and he's going to be relied on a lot more heavily this season as well, without all the weapons that Josh Allen had last year. But he had 4.7 yards per carry for 1,100 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, which is like nothing. I mean, it's crazy to think about how good of a fantasy running back he was, and he pretty much had no touchdowns. I mean, most of it came from his receiving end. He had 44 catches for 445 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's only been in the league for 2 years as well. His ceiling, I think, is 6th, so he could jump up a couple spots, especially if he's relied on as much as he is, and he really takes advantage of that and remains efficient. His floor, though, if he takes a step back, could be 13th, especially if this offense isn't as efficient as a whole. Coming in at number 8, I have Nick Chubb from the Cleveland Browns. Man, he's going to be a tough one to rank, and he's got a high ceiling, low floor, because that was such a gruesome injury he had last year. It was disgusting against the Steelers. So it'll be interesting to see how he bounces back from that. He is so good. Talent-wise, he is probably the most talented running back in the NFL. I mean, right up there with Christian McCaffrey. They're in the same tier to me. In terms of just pure talent, pure strength, and how good they are at being running backs, I think he's in the same tier as Christian McCaffrey. But when you have an injury like that, especially as a running back, sometimes it's hard to bounce back from. And so you'll notice, like last year, he only played 2 games, more like a game and a half, I think. But he had 6.1 yards per carry, 170 yards, no touchdowns, for 4 catches, 21 yards, and no touchdowns as well. He's been in the league for about 6 years. I feel like it's been more than that, but it's only been 6 seasons. And his ceiling, you'll notice I put 2nd because, like I said, I think he is right up there with Christian McCaffrey when he is fully healthy, fully going. But his floor I put 13th. Because he could drop down towards that spot if his knee injury is lingering. Coming in at number 7, we have another guy who's been struggling with injuries but has all the talent in the world. We have Jonathan Taylor from the Indianapolis Colts. Last year in the games that he played, he had 4.4 yards per carry for 741 yards, 7 touchdowns, as well as 19 catches, 153 yards, and 1 touchdown. He's been in the league for 4 years so far. His ceiling, I think, is 4th, so he could be back in that top 5 conversation in terms of running backs. His floor, though, if he stays, on and off the field, could be 10th. I still think he'll be a top 10 running back this year, though. The guy has so much talent. But yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if we get a full season of Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson. That could be really fun to watch. Coming in at number 6, we have a guy who I'm super high on personally. I really like him, Travis Etienne Jr. from the Jacksonville Jaguars. I was honestly surprised by this, but he averaged 3.8 yards per carry, which, it's really not that good. That's not that efficient, but he just seemed like if you watched him, he just seemed a lot more efficient than that. But he had about 1,000 rushing yards, 11 rushing touchdowns, as well as 58 catches, 476 yards, and 1 touchdown. Very good receiving back, one of the best receiving backs in the NFL. He's only been in the league for 2 years. Man, let's see, that would have been 2022, right? If I'm not mistaken. The 2022 NFL running back class is so stacked. How many guys have we talked about that have only been in the league for 2 years on this list? His ceiling, I think he could be a top 3 running back this year if he really takes off. His floor, though, he could drop down to 9th, but I still think he'll be a top 10 running back. And we are about to enter our top 5. So starting out, we have Saquon Barkley, one of the biggest additions this offseason for the Eagles. Well, biggest addition for the Eagles, but one of the biggest running back moves. And one of the most surprising too. I can't believe it's so weird to look at him in an Eagles jersey. It doesn't feel right. But he had about 3.9 yards per carry last year for 962 rushing yards, 6 touchdowns, as well as 41 catches, 280 yards, and 4 touchdowns receiving. He pretty much was the Giants' offense. He's been in the league for about 6 years now. His ceiling, he could be the second best running back in the league, especially if he really takes off in a brand new offense, much better offense. His floor, though, still think he'll be top 5, but he could drop a little bit if it just doesn't work out in Philly. I don't know why, but I'm getting DeMarco Murray vibes from this. I hope I'm not right, but yeah, I don't know. Coming in at number 4, we have my guy, Derrick Henry from the Baltimore Ravens. Man, what an addition this was for them. 4.2 yards per carry for about 1,200 yards, 12 touchdowns last season in his 8th year in the league, as well as 28 catches for 214 yards and 0 touchdowns. His ceiling, I think he could be the second best running back in the league this year. I mean, it's such a good match for him to be in Baltimore. They just better use him, and they have absolutely no excuse not to run the ball now. I mean, him and Lamar will be so good together. But wow, holy shit! I gave him a really low floor. I don't really think he'll drop down to that. I don't think that's realistic. But I put 17th. I guess if Baltimore doesn't use him the way that we think I don't know. That seems really low to me. But I do think there's a chance. He's a lot more. He's a lot more vulnerable to dropping this low just because of how many years he's been in the league and how many snaps he's played than the other running backs in the top 10. But I still think that's really low. But like I said, I think that he has a better chance of dropping than the other guys we've talked about. But I think he'll be really good, man. I'm a huge believer, obviously, being a Ravens fan. But I was so excited about this signing, and I'm surprised Dallas didn't get him, to be honest. Coming in at number 3, we have Breece Hall. I love Breece Hall. I am a mega fan of Breece Hall. Last year for the Jets, in such a fucking horrible offense with Zach Wilson as his quarterback, he had 4.5 yards per carry, 994 yards, as well as 5 touchdowns, 76 catches for 591 yards and 4 touchdowns. This dude is so talented. He would have been one of the best rookie running backs in the league if he didn't get hurt. And last season, he had such a good sophomore year. He pretty much is this team's offense. And I'm just getting Aaron Jones and Aaron Rodgers vibes from this. I think Aaron Rodgers will use him so well. He'll be so much better with him. I'm really excited for him this season. I think his ceiling is honestly right here. You'll see why when we talk about the next 2 guys on this list. but his floor is 8th. He's going to be so good this year. Honestly, I could put his floor as 5th. I think he's a lock as a top 5 running back this season. I love Breece Hall. And you can tell that I love him because, oops, I accidentally spoiled something. You can tell that I love him because I put him ahead of my boy, Derrick Henry. Coming in at number 2, we have Bijan Robinson from the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, this guy has got all the intangibles in the world to be a fantastic NFL running back. Had a really good rookie year last year, even though he was underused. He could have had such a better year if he didn't have a freaking idiot as his coach. So I think he'll really break out this season, especially with Kirk Cousins. Man, it's going to be a fun team to watch, honestly. I'm excited to watch Atlanta. But last year, he had 4.6 yards per carry, as well as 976 yards and 4 touchdowns. He had 58 catches for 487 yards and 4 touchdowns. Only been in the league for 1 year. His ceiling, he could be the best running back in the league this next season, depending on what happens. His floor, though, I think he's a lock as a top 5. I mean, this guy is got all the talent in the world. All the talent in the world to be great. So coming in at number 1, I mean, I don't think anybody's really surprised. We have Christian McCaffrey from the San Francisco 49ers. Dude, oh my gosh. 5.4 yards per carry, which is just absolutely insane with all of the volume he was getting for about 1,500 yards, 14 rushing touchdowns, as well as 67 catches, 564 yards, and 7 touchdowns. This dude was just a touchdown machine, and he had the yards to go with it. He's been in the league for 7 years now. Ceiling, doesn't have one. I think he's going to be number 1. His floor, he's still going to be top 3 no matter what happens this season. You know, he does have the Madden curse, but to be honest, I still think he'll be top 3. But that's all I have for you guys. I appreciate you guys watching. Appreciate you guys listening. I will be back on August 24th to do my wide receiver rankings, which I'm actually really excited to do that. I like ranking wide receivers. I don't know why, but it'll be really fun. I'll be doing, obviously, every starter or every wide receiver starter on each NFL team. It's going to be a fun video, so make sure to tune back in on August 24th. But other than that, I will see you guys then. See you guys later.